You wanna peep game with the boys, whole squad moving like we all alone. It's like we all alone. She need a place to stay for the night. Well, I'm sorry, baby, mix ain't.
Hey guys, what is up? Producer engineer Alex Scott here with Consordini.com. Thanks so much for checking out the last video in our little series on mixing trap and rap and hip hop. We have done our beat and all of our synths and basses and everything. We've done our main vocals, lead vocals, and then we've done our choruses, hooks, ad-libs, all that stuff. We've got ourselves a mix, basically, and I think it's sounding great. So I've taken a little bit of time. I have gone away, listened to it on my home stereo system in my car, which is always a very important part when you're finalizing your mix. I did change some things, basic balancing, this louder and quieter. I brought the arpeggiator up a little bit. I had also added a little bit of kind of mid-range to the lead vocal, to several of the vocals, actually. It was a broadband boost, I think around 400, 500, something like that. I ended up taking that off and actually rolling out a little bit of low and mid in the vocals, because as they were all occurring together, they were starting to get a little bit muddy. So that's one thing that I changed. But I think we've got a really, really great mix overall. So now we're moving into the mastering phase. Now, before we get started, I do want to just talk about a couple of points with mastering that I think are very important to be aware of. Mastering is a very, very critical part of the record making, beat making, all that stuff. It's a very important part of the process. And it's widely misunderstood, really. I work with a lot of artists and a lot of clients and, people online and stuff. I get a lot of mixes over Fiverr. If you guys are familiar with Fiverr, I do have an account there. And I get these requests where people are like, oh, I need you to master my song. And I go, okay. They send it to me, and I go, well, do you have any, stuff that you're really specifically looking for? And they go, yeah, the vocal needs less reverb, and the bass needs to be punchier, and blah blah blah, that kind of stuff. And I have to go, well, that's the mix. That's a whole separate step in the process. And if you're not happy with your mix, I can mix it for you, certainly, but that is not mastering. You can't take care of that in a WAV file or a stereo MP3 or whatever. So, basically, long story long, make sure that your mix is exactly where you want it and it sounds almost like a finished product before you start thinking about mastering. You don't want to be trying to compensate for mix issues in the master. It's not going to work, and that's not really what mastering is for. Mastering is, I don't want to call it a black art or voodoo or something, but it's a very technical process that has a lot to do with like loudness standards and volume consistency song to song if you're working on an EP or an album project. It has a lot to do with corrective EQing to remove problem frequencies and stuff. When you really get into doing mastering, it is a technical process, and I always recommend. I am happy to mix and master for clients. I do it all the time. But if you have the budget or the ability, I would either mix the tune yourself if you're confident as a mixer, have somebody mix the tune for you, and then actually take it to another more dedicated mastering engineer. Because even I am not, I understand mastering. I've mastered with some incredible, Grammy Award-winning mastering engineers in my career, and it's amazing to watch them work. I understand the gist of the process, and I want to share some tips and thoughts and stuff on mastering yourself. But at the end of the day, a dedicated mastering engineer with dedicated equipment that's suitable for this is really going to be the route that you want to go if you can afford it. It is an extra expense, it's an extra hassle, and I totally understand why a lot of people out there want, just a mix and master all in one spot. But the advantages of using somebody after the fact, it really just comes down to having a second set of ears on your project, having somebody who can listen to it objectively and then has the technical know-how to really sculpt the song into a finished product. Now, obviously, for a lot of us, especially a lot of bedroom producers and that kind of thing, we don't have that budget. We might not have the ability to go to a dedicated mastering engineer and have them work on the project. You also might not even necessarily find that to be something you need to do, because, for guys who are starting out or guys who do music as a hobby, maybe they have a SoundCloud or a YouTube channel and they just, they make beats, they think they're cool, they work with their friends. It's not ultra critical if that's the scenario. If you're planning on releasing something and you want it to really sound as polished and professional as it can, and again, have the budget, blah, 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 dedicated mastering engineer is always a great way to go. But for those of us who cannot or are not interested in having that be a part of our process, there are definitely a lot of things that you can do on your own. If you're serious about this, I would recommend at least investing in this wonderful little piece of software that I use constantly. It does 80 to 90% of my mastering tasks when I'm doing plug-in only. I do have some analog gear in my racks that I use for mastering, but if I'm just doing quick and easy and want it to sound great without too much effort, I use Ozone from Isotope. Now, you can get this for $15 a month, and it really is so good and so useful and so versatile that I really would recommend that you pick up Ozone. It's a great piece of software. It's going to get you all your mastering needs in one easy to use spot. So we have our track here. Again, we finished the mix, and by the way, the artist for this track is Fresh Mix, M-I-C-K-S, fabulous artist based out of California. If you guys have seen the other videos in the series, obviously you'll be familiar with the track at this point. Head to his website, freshmix.com, and check out his music if you like it. I sure do, and we're very appreciative of having this track to work on. So another thing is you're seeing I'm in a bit of a different view here in my software in Studio One. One of the reasons I love Studio One is because it has this dedicated mastering view that has some really great spectrum analysis tools and has some really great metering tools and all this, a Lisa Zhu graph built right in. I'm not going to get too much into the technical, working, what are your LUFs? How many LUFs does the track have? And all this loudness stuff. I'm just going to give you guys some good general pointers within Ozone to get your track sounding as good as it can. So,
yeah. All right, man.
Ooh, that's fresh.
Yeah.
we've got our track.
Jesus, I pray they leave us before it's
Another important thing to think about when you go to export your final mix. Sorry to interrupt the playback there, but very, very important. You want to make sure your mix has enough headroom. So you want to look at your master output and make sure that it never goes above 0. Ideally, you want 2 to 3 dB below that to where it's peaking. The loudest the mix ever gets is at about -3 dB. You want to leave a little bit of headroom so that we can work with it in mastering and have a nice clean source.
They want to see us and never scout. I came along with the winners. We never hang with the ops. We don't love these hoes. That's the rule. I don't cheat.
So I have a basic routine that I go through in Ozone, and it goes something a little bit like this. Start with an EQ, and this EQ can be as broad and gentle or as technical and surgical as we need it to be. But I use the basic EQ in Ozone to do a couple of things. The first thing I do is we go into what we call mid-side mode. So mid-side is a really cool way to process material. It basically takes your center image, your mono image, basically all the information that's in both speakers, mono information, and puts it on one channel. And then it takes all of the information that is only in one or the other speaker and puts that on a second channel. So you're still only using 2 channels, but you're looking at stereo in a different way. Instead of thinking about left and right, you are thinking about the middle of your mix, the mono content, and then the stereo content on the outsides. This allows us to do a couple of different things. One, it makes us, it helps us if we want to widen our image, okay? Make the mix feel wider and more expansive and more open, which I love in my mixes. So, and then also another thing that it helps to do is keep our low frequencies nice and centered in the middle. Because when you have lots of stereo-based information in your mix, it can just lead to some weird balance issues, and like when you listen to it in a car, because the speakers are in unusual places in a car, it just does weird stuff. So I like to remove low frequencies and add high frequencies to the outside of the mix, the stereo information. And then I sometimes will, either pull back the highs a little bit in the mid-channel or just use the mid-channel more to do some technical sculpting. So we're going to solo, using this little solo button here, on middle channel. Now we're listening to only the mono content.
With all of my chiefs, yeah, we ain't bred in the streets, but you know they got the hammer if they need. Young squad for the kingdom, chasing after tail like I'm Sonic Canyon. Mix another gin with the.
So I'm just sweeping through with this EQ right here to try to hear if there's anything that stands out or sounds a little bit nasty. And it's actually sounding a little bit even. It's actually sounding quite even, I should say.
Get another win, I'ma call it like a psychic or a prophet. There ain't no one that can stop it or defeat us. You wanna beat game with the boys, whole squad moving.
So one thing I'm hearing is really nice is actually adding a little bit of 800 to this center, which is, you know, kind of those upper mids. It just gives it a little bit more sweetness and a little bit more more mid presence. So we're going to add a little bump, just 1 dB there. And this is very subtle stuff, you know. Another thing that I will definitely do is we'll take our low here and we'll give just another little bump. I love 50 and 60 down in that range. It just gives you really nice subbiness, but it's still clean.
Need a place to stay for the night. Well, I'm sorry, baby, mix ain't never home. Mix ain't never home. I never go out looking for the havoc. Lose a starting static, guess what comes around goes around, go. I took off in the...
So yeah, we're just adding a little bit of presence in the kick and bass. So that's sounding pretty good as just a starting point. So now we're going to listen to our stereo information. So solo our side here. Now you're hearing exclusively what's in stereo. So I immediately high pass, like I said, to clean up those bass frequencies on the outside of the mix. There aren't many, as you can see on screen, but we just like to pull that up. And you can hear there's basically no kick drum in there at all anymore, so, or bass or anything. And then I'm just going to take a high shelf, go to, you know, I don't know, 5, 6K, somewhere in there, and just add a little bit of extra shine.
I'ma call it like a psychic or a prophet. Never scout, I can belong with the winners. We never hang with the ops. We love these hoes.
Taking it in and out, it's not really doing a whole ton. It's very subtle. And again, that's mastering. We're not, you know, doing crazy reinvent the wheel type stuff where we're trying to alter the balance of instruments or anything. We're just generally just massaging the outsides a little bit, giving it a little bit of extra polish. So that's where we're at with that EQ. Now, I'm not hearing many more like problem frequency type stuff. It's sounding pretty good to me. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to our compressor here. Now, this is a multi-band compressor that Ozone has, which you can use it a little bit like an EQ. You can use it like a, you know, quote unquote normal compressor. But what I usually like to do, you want to think about where each frequency spectrum or where each band, you know, kind of how you want to treat it. So when you get into ultra low lows, you do want them to be consistent. So we're going to solo. This is really just basically our kick drum. Our crossover is at 140 hertz. So it's the kick and our bass. So we do want to glue those together a little bit. So we're going to compress them a little bit more heavily. Up our ratio a little bit. And that's, you know, that's pretty good right there. You can feel it gluing it together a little bit more. Now we're going to listen to the mid-range.
I never go out looking for the havoc. Lose a starting static, guess what comes around goes around, go.
We don't want to crush this as hard because it's going to make our vocals muddy and do some stuff. So we're going to back off the compression there a little bit and let our mid-range breathe. Upper mids. This can bring out some interesting frequencies. This is up in the 2 to 10K range. So you're looking at your telephone frequencies. You're looking at the frequencies you've de-essed in the vocals. So you want to be a little careful up here. And I'm listening to it, you know, as I back the compressor, it's making things sound a little bit harsh. So I'm not going to do much in that region either. Now the extreme highs, now we're looking at 10K and up. This I definitely like to bring out. So we are going to compress a little bit more. And then we're going to add just a little bit of gain. That's going to bump our brightness.
Girl, it's a rap like a turban, I spit.
So again, we're just smoothing things out here. We're not doing anything crazy. So without the dynamics, without the compression,
we never hang with the ops. We love these hoes. That's the rule, I don't cheat. Why you think
it just tightens things up a little bit. Okay? So now we're going to add our next stage. which is imaging. So we've now EQ'd our signal a little bit. We've gotten it smoothed out with some compression, band by band. Now we want to think about our stereo image. So we've set our crossover points all the same, 140, 2K, 10K. There's the defaults in Ozone, and I find they work great. And each of these sliders is going to control how much width there is in that particular frequency band. So I just, as a pretty general rule of thumb, do something like this. We widen a fair bit. The very top gives us a nice sparkly outside and top end to our mix. I do a little bit less in the upper mids. And that can actually help to soften any leftover SE snattiness type stuff or any of those weird frequencies up in there, because it's going to spread them out a little bit and smooth them out through the stereo field. And then in the mids and low mids, I keep that pretty tight because, again, we don't want a ton of muddiness on the outside, and it's already, you know, in our mix, it should be wide enough. And then I actually decrease width on the low end because, again, that just helps to suck in the sides on the bottom and keep your low end nice and stable.
Really thinking of me, fucking with all of my chiefs. Yeah, we ain't bred in the streets, but you know they got the hammer if they need young squad for the kingdom. Chasing after tail like I'm Sonic, can you keep up? Mix another gin with the tonic.
I'm actually going to push these high mids out a little bit more.
Get another win, I'ma call it like a psychic or a prophet there.
Something like that. So now our image is widened a little bit. Now all we have to do is bring it up to volume. And we have two different tools that we can use to do that. We have a maximizer and we have a limiter. I prefer to go with the maximizer.
No one that can stop it.
All the maximizer does is it normalizes volume. So it's like a compressor, but it's much more subtle. It's like the Waves vocal writer that we used in the vocal mixing video. It just brings everything up and just kind of glues everything and makes the volume nice and even and helps to raise the overall gain. And this is where you're going to want to start watching your main meter, which this meter right here. This is our real loudness meter. So we're going to start with a threshold of -5 on the maximizer. And we're watching this gap right here.
Stay for the night, well I'm sorry baby, mix ain't never home. I never go out looking.
These numbers down here are additional loudness information. Again, very complicated to explain, so I won't go super deep into it.
For the havoc, lose a starting static, guess what comes around.
But honestly, the easiest thing at this stage in the process is if you are shooting for a certain level, Ozone has a spectacular feature, this reference right here, where you can actually drag in an MP3 or a wave of a song whose level you want to match, and you can swap back and forth the reference file with no processing and then your file with the loudness processing, and you can, you know, just by ear, basically, really closely match the loudness of the two. I can tell just from listening to this and from watching the meter, this is plenty loud enough. You know, we still have a bit of dynamic range, 3 dB maybe. You don't want to crush too hard. You don't want to come in here and start doing that kind of thing. Yeah, it sounds loud, but you start to lose a lot of quality. So, you know, you definitely are going to want to... I never really let this go beyond 6 or 7.
Girl, it's a rap like a turban.
Obviously, rap is generally much louder music, so...
Bit sermons and every beat I get on murder. The whole squad coming through so perfect. You gon' learn it. Everything I did worth it. The young mix, yeah, I'm about to win. Mix got the juice, don't forget the...
Oh, and we just saw we have a little bit of clipping. So that means our mix is getting too loud. So we're going to back off this maximizer, and just to make sure we catch any transients, I'm going to add a limiter and set the threshold at -0.1 and then the ceiling at 0. This is going to not do much, but if we do have a clip, it's going to catch it, which is always good.
Money's the root of evil, homie, that's a sin. Well, then you must not know what I'm after then. Let's go.
Or actually, our dynamics range is getting a little bit much, down to -6, which is, you know, again, rap should be loud. Generally speaking. So we'll... Okay, that's feeling pretty good. Now I am going to actually go back into our mid EQ, and I'm going to make this low boost a little bit bigger. I'm going to move it up a tiny bit. We're going to go to 65, 2 dB, widen that shelf. And actually, another thing that you can do is, oops, that is not what I wanted to do. Another thing that you can do, if you so desire, is, and I probably won't do it with this track. I was trying to do it right there, but messed it up a little bit. Is low pass or high pass rather, your ultra lows, down 20 hertz, 30 hertz. If you ever feel your mix is just too rumbly and subby and out of control, even if you're boosting at 50 or 60 to give it the subbiness, sometimes there's stray frequencies way down in that ultra low register that nobody ever really even hears. It just creates rumble and some unpleasant things. So if you're finding that's a problem in your masters, you can go down there and scrub that ultra low information, and you're not going to lose any low end, because again, it's lower than low end. And all it does is cause distortion and weird stuff in speakers. So if you've got that going on in your mix, that's definitely something you can look at.
What you know about next? I've been coming through looking like a big gold check. That's 100 grand sitting on my neck. You really didn't know, boy, I'm coming through wearing sharp vests. I know, a veteran in the game, homie, what you trying to do?
That's sounding real good.
You wanna beat game with the boys, whole squad moving like we all alone. It's like we all alone. She need a place to stay for the night. Well, I'm sorry, baby, Mix ain't never home. Nah, Mix ain't never home. I never go out looking for the havoc. Lose a starting static, guess what comes around goes around, go. I took off in the tinted out Lex, cup a new year, now that one's old. Guess what comes around, go. So what's the move, what's the move, what's the move? I'm 23, still moving like...
There you go. Mastering. You know, again, everything that I said at the top of the video still definitely applies. If you can go with a mastering engineer who's dedicated to it and can be that objective ear on the project, I always recommend that. But hopefully, especially for Ozone users, if you guys are interested or finding the need to do a lot of mastering yourself, this has given you some idea of how to get there and how to get your finished track just that much more polished and ready for release. So, thank you guys so much for watching. If you've watched through this whole, series of couple videos that we've done on mixing this song, I really, really appreciate it. I hope you guys have found it useful. And again, all mix engineers are different. Everybody hears things a little bit differently. Everybody goes for a different vibe with their track. This is how I work. These are the kinds of mixes that I like to create. My purpose in these videos is not to tell you guys what you have to do, because to each their own. There's no rules in this business. There are some good general things to adhere to and some good ideas to always keep in mind, but ultimately how your mixes sound is up to you. But I hope I've been able to provide a little bit of inspiration or some new ideas for how you guys treat your beats, your vocals, your ad-libs, your mastering, all this kind of stuff. So thank you guys again very much for watching. My name is Alex Scott with Consordini.com. The track was provided by Fresh Mix. It is called Preach. Definitely check out his website, freshmix.com. Again, we really, really appreciate the opportunity to get such a great track from such a talented artist to get to work on and show you guys a little bit of what goes into mixing a great trap rap tune. So we will see you guys in the next video.
You wanna beat game with the boys, whole squad moving like we all alone. It's like we all alone. She need a place to stay for the night. Well, I'm sorry, baby, Mix ain't never home. Nah, Mix ain't never home. I never go out looking for the havoc. Lose a starting static, guess what comes around goes around, go. I took off in the tinted out Lex, cup a new year, now that one's old. Guess what comes around, go. So what's the move, what's the move, what's the move? I'm 23, still moving like...